class. This week we're starting off with Chapter 1, Overview of Community Practice. Community practice applies practice skills to alter the behavioral patterns of community groups, organizations, and institutions, or people's relationships and interactions with community structures. It is the same as macropractice in community organization. Macropractice can be defined as the professional directed intervention designed to bring about planned change in organizations and communities. Community organization and the related community development are the practices of helping community or parts of a community, such as a neighborhood or a group of people with common interests, to become a more effective, efficient, and supportive social environment for nurturing people and their social relationships. When it comes to social planning, it is a subset of community organization. It addresses the development and coordination of community agencies and services to meet community functions and responsibilities and to provide for its members. Social action is another community organization subset. It involves practices and strategies to develop, redistribute, and control community statuses and resources, including social power, and to change community relations and behavior patterns to promote development or redistribution of community resources. Community practices objectives are to develop organizing skills and abilities of individuals and groups, to make social planning more accessible and inclusive in a community, to connect social and economic involvement to grassroots community groups, to advocate for broad coalitions in solving community problems, and to infuse the social planning process with a concern for social justice. Will and Gamble has an 8 practice domain. The model's 8 practice domains are neighborhood and community organizing, organizing functional communities, community, social and economic development, social planning, social development and community liaison, political and social action, coalitions building and maintenance, and social movements. It also expands the practice domains into more specific skills, such as budgeting, grant writing, and a wide range of research skills. It also includes some analytic skills of power analysis, needs assessment, and political analysis. So the macro social worker and direct service or clinical social worker can differ in perspective. So the community organizer assumes that if the community functions more effectively and is responsive to its members, then they will be healthier and happier. The direct service practitioner tends to view the community as supportive or a potentially supportive resource for a specific client or a class of clients, with community change efforts designed to improve the community for these clients. So social workers often engage in both modalities of practice, either simultaneously or sequentially. They work directly with clients, and at the same time, they develop community resources. Communities are always the context, if not always the content, of social work practice. Communities and community practice have been central to social work's history and development. Understanding, intervening in, and using the client's social environment as part of the helping process are skills consonant with the professional's ecological foundation. Social work systems, especially communities, strongly influence the ways that people think and act. Communities can be nurturing environments providing basic social, economic, and emotional supports to individuals and families. However, communities can also be hostile places with inequities that can contribute significantly to individual and family malfunctioning. Community theories can help us understand what communities are, how they function, and how they can also influence our behavior. Oftentimes, theories offer propositions to explain how communities can function to serve their members more effectively. Community theories are complex because communities are complex. Community practice is the shared foundation skills of all social workers. It is rooted in the profession's purpose and mission, and its history, policies of the 2 major American professional social work associations, and also shared by most professional associations globally. Gordon was a leading social work theorist. He stated that improving the client's social functioning is the cardinal mission of contemporary social work practice. The profession's attention is focused on the transactions between people and their social environment and the management of those transactions. So the importance of clients' community is reflected in social work's dual perspectives of person in environment and person and environment, as well as the ecological approach. Community practice skills have been an indispensable component of social work's practice since the beginning of the profession. Since the start of social work profession, the main concern has been to improve individuals' social functioning. Mary Richmond, an American social work pioneer, recognized the importance of community theory, the social environment, and community practice skills. So charity organization, society, and settlement houses has been a part of the early development of social work, especially community practice. The Charity Organization Society, Mary Richmond's principal agency, and the leading casework agency of the era in Great Britain and the US held that community work was fundamental to casework. Social work's largest professional association globally, the National Association of Social Workers, and America's social work education's accrediting body, the Council on Social Work Education, recognize the importance of community theory and skills for all social work practitioners. So the NASW Code of Ethics Preamble further notes that community and macro skills are central to the profession. The CSWE's Commission on Accreditation, the national accrediting organizations for graduate and undergraduate professional social work education, charges that all social work students acquire knowledge and skills in social relations and the range of social systems, such as organizations, social institutions, and communities as part of their professional foundation. So since the last quarter of the 20th century, there has been a lot of changes in the social work practice environment. There has been federal government involvement with services coordination. We have seen federal, state, and local human services policies move toward reduction, competition, privatization of public programs in generally conservative areas. With devolution and increased local authority control and responsibility for social welfare, all social workers increasingly need community practice knowledge and skills. Social workers need to assess local communities for needed resources, develop resource networks and support systems, and advocate for themselves and their client. Social workers have to develop their own resources in a competitive world. Despite social work's rich history of community practice, the evidence is that the importance of community practice in social work is declining. There's the book Unfaithful Angels that alleges that social work has abandoned its historical mission of service, especially service to the poor, in pursuit of psychotherapies and private practice and increased income and status. So check out the book Unfaithful Angels. See what you think. Where do you think we're going as a profession? And where are we going in terms of communities? Only 1% of licensed social workers spend about 20 hours or more a week in either community organization or policy development. Only about 34% spend any time in community organization and 30% in policy development. The profession's movement away from community and social concerns can also be illustrated in NASW's social action and legislative agenda. So NASW's major legislative efforts and successes nationally and by state chapters to obtain licensure and legally mandated capacity to receive third-party vendor payments for therapies have also led to policy trust of function over cause. Here are also some current initiatives going on. If you click on those links, you should be able to get to those. Problem solving and change efforts begin with recognition by an individual or a group, the initiator of the change effort or a condition perceived as a problem that requires change. The initiator may be the client, it can be a parent, a couple experiencing marital discord, or others such as an individual who may fear child abuse or neglect by another person and may refer the situation to Protective Services Agency. A community group can also pinpoint problems of employment, crime, or poor treatment received from public or other social organizations. SMART objectives are the desired accomplishment and results of an intervention with a client system that the change is seeking. Objectives are stated in empirical and behavioral language and specify changes in the client system, target system, or ecology. They must be specific, so goals and objectives, as well as the words, ideas, and concepts used to describe them, are precise and not stated in vague generic language. Goals and objectives need to contain operational and measurement criteria used to indicate their achievement, so they should be measurable. Goals and objectives must be acceptable to the client system and ultimately to the action system and other resource providers that must cooperate with the problem-solving strategy to achieve the objectives, so they should be acceptable. They should be realistic. So goals and objectives are accomplishable within the complexities of the case, time frame, resources, and intervention methodologies available. They should be results oriented. So final goals and all objectives are expressed as outcomes, events, and accomplishments by the client and action system, or changes in a target rather than as a service, event, or a process. They should also be time specific. A specific time frame or target for accomplishing the goals and objectives is projected. Time limits are inherent if objectives are real and not simply desired outcomes. Time limits are also based on the intervention's power, the resources available, and the conditions favorable to the change, as well as the barriers that may be blocking change and objective accomplishment. Phase 2 in the problem-solving process is to gather information on the problem and possible resources for intervention to achieve the SMART objectives. During this phase, the social worker gathers information on the problem to develop an intervention plan. The third phase is assessment and development of the case theory and plan for change to accomplish a SMART objective. The case can be an individual, a group, a community, or part of a community. However, the change effort extends beyond the individual unit to include its ecology and situation. A case theory is the theory or coherent explanation of a case's problem, its relevant causations, a specification of desired outcomes, selection of intervention strategies, and methods of changing a condition and producing the desired outcomes, and a prediction of why and how the selective interventions will work. The intervention is a change effort to achieve the desired outcomes based on the case theory. Social work interventions can be categorized under casework strategies, clinical approaches, community organization, or environmental and social change, among others. The last phase of the social work problem-solving strategy is the evaluation of its effectiveness in achieving the stated goals and objectives. So depending on the level of achievement and the stability of the change, the case may be terminated. The process may be repeated to enhance its effectiveness or to achieve additional objectives, or the case may be referred to additional service resources. So on page 14 and page 17, there's specific examples using more of a direct practice approach and one of a community practice approach. So when reading over the chapter, go ahead and read over those cases and you can see how each step of the problem solving process is used in a specific case example. And as you can see, the same process applies for working with individuals in community. A profession is more than an occupation or tradespeople with special skills. A profession is a vocation, an avocation, and a calling. The notion of a vocation comes from religious base of most professions, meaning that the adherent will lead a certain type of life or moral behavior and service. It is a calling to care. A profession's value constitute the service calling, not its technology. This is what distinguishes professions from occupations and contributes to their public sanctions. Social work ethics are derived from more abstract values. Ethics are rules to guide the social worker's conduct and behavior. Values are the motivators for the behaviors called for by ethics. Values have a greater emotional charging than do ethics. They motivate ethics and behavior. Values direct the nature of social workers' missions, the relationships, obligations, and duties social workers have for clients, colleagues, and the broader community. Social work's basic value configuration is a result of the many forces and orientations that the profession has been subjected to and embraced over the years. Some authorities believe that social work's values base distinguishes it from other professions. Professional social workers are assumed to embrace a core set of values. The NASW Code of Ethics states that the core values of the social work profession are the foundation of social work's unique purpose and perspective. NASW holds social justice as one of its 6 core values and ethical principles. Social justice requires social workers to challenge negative discrimination, recognize diversity, distribute resources equitably, challenge unjust policies and practice, and working in solidarity. So virtue ethics is at the heart of social workers' values of professional integrity and competence. Virtue ethics is an approach to ethics that is rooted in judgments about the character or virtue of the individual as the basis of what is ethical. Virtue ethics is about character, living well or good. Virtue ethics represents the good life in a moral rather than a material or a sensual sense. Moral virtues that a virtuous person exhibits are prudence, a sense of justice, courage, truthfulness, and compassion. So as you can see, virtue ethics is related to more about the character and integrity of a person rather than the rules. Ethics are prescriptions and proscriptions for professional behavior. Ethics deal with the right, the good, the correct, and the rules of conduct for behavior. They address the whats of behavior more than whys of behavior. Ethics provides a basis for defining professional good guys and bad guys. The professions and professionals' values and ethics, along with practice wisdom and experience and technical and empirical research-based knowledge, provide the criteria for selecting actions and making judgments, choices, and decisions of interventions, methods, and practice behavior. So which of the 6 areas of ethical standards do you think relate to community practice? What do the standards indicate we have a professional responsibility to do or not to do related to community practice? Think of those discussion questions as you're reading the chapter. Fiduciary responsibility. So look up the word fiduciary. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But look up the word. How does it apply to social work? To community practice, have you even heard this word before? When it comes to social work practice, I'm sure you're going to run into several issues and dilemmas. NASW has specific ethical guidelines that we follow to kind of help us throughout those issues and dilemmas. Sometimes they may be easier to follow than others, but the important thing is to recognize those dilemmas. If you're unsure how to deal with them, talk to your supervisor, talk to colleagues. Other people may have had experience with those dilemmas and issues before that can provide some advice. Advocacy is a professional and ethical responsibility for all social workers. It is a part of social workers' fiduciary responsibility. Advocacy is basically defined as representing and supporting a client, a group, organization, or cause to others. A social worker's first responsibility is not to risk the client, whether an individual or a community organization, for the greater good, unless the client makes an informed decision to be at risk in the quest for a greater social, collective, and institutional good. So informed consent requires that the client has valid information on the risk, the probability level that the risk will occur, and if they occur, will produce greater good, an appreciation of any personal gains and losses by client and worker, and any organizational and employment constraint placed on the workers in the advocacy and change effort. Individuals, groups, and community organizations have the right to decide what those risks are. So they have a right not to be ignorantly placed in harm's way by community practitioners pursuing a social, collective, or institutional good. Clients and action systems deserve the opportunity to participate or not participate on the basis of appraisal of the gains and risks to them. They need to be advised of the extent to which a social worker or sponsoring agency will go to protect them or to share the risk with them. Clients have a right to provide or refuse informed consent. The social worker has a duty to warn others of the risk that a client's behavior may pose to them, and a duty to warn a client of the risk faced in any personal or social change effort. So, a pragmatic challenge to an agency-based social worker or a social worker who is financially dependent on a third party is whistleblowing. Whistleblowing calls public attention to social and legal wrongdoing by an agency or funding sources personnel, usually persons in authority. So here are some discussion questions as we end the chapter. Think of an example in which your development and functioning has been or is influenced by the community. What are some ethical dilemmas faced in practice for client advocacy when employed by social agency? And how does the concept of benefit to the greatest number of people, even when risking harm to a few, fit in the social work field? Okay, so that brings us to the end of chapter 1. Hopefully you kind of have a feel of community practice and kind of have an idea as to whether you think this would be an area of interest working in the field. Some people are more drawn to direct practice. However, other people really enjoy the community aspect of social work. And that's what this whole class is about. So hopefully, whether you decide to go in that area or not, it will also provide you with knowledge and skills in the area of community practice. I also just want to remind you that there is a quiz after each chapter. Please listen to the lecture, but also please read the chapter. So whether you choose to read the chapter first and then listen to the lecture, or listen to the lecture and then read the chapter, however, whatever works for you. But just want to make sure that you're not missing anything, that the lecture may not cover every single thing in the book. So please make sure that you're doing both. That way you can be prepared for the quiz.